Have you ever needed a divine intervention? I mean, perhaps you were in a car accident or maybe diagnosed with a serious illness, or you had a loved one that was suffering. When this happens, we call out to God for Him to step in to miraculously change the outcome, to give us a miracle. And when it comes, there's no other explanation than to give God the credit. You know, maybe you have a God story. That was a defining moment in your life where you experienced the tangible power and work of God to intervene on your behalf, to maybe miraculously heal or to rescue from a potentially tragic event, or to provide a financial provision just when you thought you were at the bottom. Well, we all want to experience God interventions in our life, but sadly, for many, they feel that they have never personally experienced an intervention from God. Yet the Bible tells us that God has intervened. Actually, He's intervened for each one of us, and yet so many will miss it. In fact, God's intervention is so clear, it's essentially right in front of our face, and yet we can miss it. How is that possible? Well, in Romans 10, Paul is addressing the Jewish nation, the very people that God chose to reveal Himself to everyone through. And it says in verses 1 to 5 of Romans 8, "Dear brothers and sisters, the longing of my heart and my prayer to God is for the people of Israel to be saved. I know what enthusiasm they have for God, but it's misdirected zeal. For they don't understand God's way of making people right with Himself. Refusing to accept God's way, they cling to their own way of getting right with God by trying to keep the law. For Christ has already accomplished the purpose for which the law was given. As a result, all who believe in Him are made right with God." Well, that's from the New Living Translation. Did you catch that? God has intervened. In fact, He's provided a way to be made right with Him, and yet the Jews and many others miss it. How? Well, it said right in the verse, although they have enthusiasm for God, it's misdirected zeal. In other words, you can be sincere, even in your beliefs about God, but you can be sincerely wrong. How were they wrong? Well, they refused to believe that God had divinely intervened for them through Jesus. They didn't accept God's way of making people right with Him. So they clung to their own way of getting to be right with God. And that was, well, by keeping the law, by being good, by doing the right thing. And yet that is not God's way. He tells us the law can't save us, but Christ can. Anyone who believes in Jesus will be made right with God. That's it. The greatest divine intervention of all time has come. The greatest miracle ever is that everyone can be right with God. He says a few verses later that it's so obvious it's right in front of our face. Romans 10 verses 8 and 9 say, "The message is very close at hand. It's on your lips and it's in your heart." And that message is the very message about faith that we preach. If you openly declare that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised Jesus from the dead, you will be saved. And verse 13 says, "For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved." That is the greatest divine intervention of all time. And it's for you, and it's for me, and it's for everyone who will believe. So don't miss it. Don't misdirect your zeal for God in trying to be good enough or religious enough or even spiritual enough. God has come to us through Jesus. This is the greatest divine intervention, the greatest miracle of all time, and it's for us. Say yes to Jesus and receive God's miracle for you today, because, well, that's courageous living.